Playing a video game requires three things: a console, a game, and a controller. We've ranked consoles and games plenty of times over the years, but controllers? What could possibly be interesting about controllers? Well, only everything. It's literally the device that lets you interact with the game you're playing. Controllers aren't just buttons and sticks, but they're an expression of the vision for every given console. The controller is the only part of the process in which you decide what happens on screen. Without the controller, video games would just be videos. But really quickly before we begin, let me ask you a question. What is a controller? Sorry, that may sound stupid, but my answer would be any device that connects to a console to control a game. However, for this list, I'm only going to rank controllers I consider console controllers. Basically, any device that was designed for the system as a whole in mind. Unfortunately, this means no Zapper, no Wii Fit balance board, and no DK bongos. Now, why am I doing this? Well, it's just not a fair comparison. Some of these are fun, but they were designed with one or two games in mind, and ranking them alongside things like Joy-Cons or Wiimotes would just feel weird. So here's how it's going to go down. I'm going to rank each controller based on its practicality, innovation, and execution. I call it the Pi score. Practicality will be rated based on a controller's ergonomics, layout, and ease of use. Innovation will be rated on how well the controller innovated off of what was already on the market. And execution will be rated on how well it executed its console vision. We'll grade each category on a 5-point scale and tally them up. All right, let's get started. I'm sorry, you just can't be a good controller if there isn't anything to play. Nothing to see here, let's move on. The NES Advantage is straight up terrible. It was designed to mimic the arcade experience at home, but fails horrendously in almost every possible way. Firstly, as you can probably tell, this controller was not meant to be held, but to rest on a flat surface, which is just a brilliant idea for a home console, and where most of the time the player will either be on a couch, chair, or preferably in this case, the floor. I know this is hindsight bias, as at the time, a joystick would have been seen as an advantage to the player, but in reality, it's just trying too hard to be anything at all. Whether it be the slow-mo feature that would really just spam the pause button, or the turbo controls that let you set either the A or B button to be spammed, the Advantage feels more like a gimmick than an actual pro controller. Practicality gets a 1 for being clunky and taking up 2 controller ports. Innovation gets a 1 because not only is it not innovating, it's really de-innovating going back to arcade controls. And execution is a 1 because one of the main features doesn't even work with most games. The N64 controller is the unfortunate reality of what you get when you've got a great idea, but you just can't seem to get it right. First of all, we just have to talk about the elephant in the room. The M-shaped controller was just a terrible idea. I get what they were going for, left hand on the outside for 2D, left hand on the inside for 3D, but the bottom line is that no matter what way you hold it, it just feels clunky and unnecessarily busy. Seriously, this whole right side of the controller is giving me anxiety just looking at it. Am I seriously supposed to control the camera with those C buttons? And don't even get me started on how terrible the stick is. However, I have to give it kudos for actually trying and delivering a usable controller for the very confusing time that was the jump to 3D. No one knew what a 3D game controller was supposed to look like, and they delivered something that got the job done. However, practicality is unfortunately a 1, and I really just can't give it any higher. Innovation gets a 4 for the introduction of 3D controls through the stick and C buttons, as well as introducing rumble, even if it was sold separately. And finally, execution was a 2. Like I said, it got the job done and didn't really hinder the player's experience, but overall, it could have been a lot better than what we got. Back to where it all started. The NES controller is so damn iconic. Just look at this thing. The gray and black design with red accents was just so clean. Everything about this controller screams Nintendo. The D-pad, while not created for the NES, was definitely put on the map by this controller, replacing the joystick forever, or at least for the next decade or so. It kind of became the standard all future controllers were built off. Name a controller that doesn't have a D-pad, an A and B button, or a start and select. Even if you can, they're usually just called something else or in close resemblance. However, we have to talk about its ergonomics. I don't know about you, but I don't have Lego hands, so I actually need something round to hold on to that doesn't dig into my hands. This controller is just not comfortable at all to play with, especially if you got somewhat big hands. It still gets points for being innovative and being exactly what it needed to be for the NES, but overall, I think there's just better controllers ahead. The Wii Classic controller is just that. Classic. everything any classic game might need. 2 sticks, 4 face buttons, and a nice D-pad, and your obligatory start, select, and home button. So why is it so low? Well, because of plagiarism. If you couldn't tell, this is just an SNES controller with 2 sticks. Now, maybe this is just a flaw in my ratings, but nothing about this controller is innovative, which is probably exactly what it's going for since it's literally called the classic controller. Its practicality is fine, even if it's weirdly leashed to the Wiimote. It does its job and makes Virtual Console games playable, but I'm just not sure I can reward it any higher on this list when there are controllers doing what this controller did a decade earlier. The Wii Classic Controller Pro is nearly identical to the Classic. However, this time, it's got handles, and I'm not even gonna lie, that bumps it up a point. Ergonomics matter. If it feels good in my hands, you've got my attention. The NES Dogbone is practically the prototype SNES controller. It was released alongside the NES New Style, known for its top-loading cartridge port. I guess everything from the SNES was taken from the NES New Style. Huh. Anyway, this controller slaps. It feels great in my hands, even if it's a bit small. I love the D-pad on this thing, and the slanted buttons are honestly such a welcomed addition. I really have nothing bad to say about this controller. I guess I could say it's not wireless, but that's just stupid. No controller was wireless at the time. It's clean, works great, and is everything you could ask for in a controller from the early 90s. Only complaint is that it doesn't look as cool as the original NES controller. That design was just too iconic. Trust me, I'm just as shocked as you are. The Wii U Pro Controller is an incredibly amazing controller. Ergonomics, check. Button layout, pretty much check. Could have gone without the 2 sticks on top, but I get they were trying to mimic the gamepad, so I'm not too miffed. It looks, feels, and plays incredible. On any other Nintendo console, I believe this controller is truly a top 5 controller all time. However, the Wii U is so dependent on the gamepad that it is almost impossible to use this controller to do anything besides play games. Navigating menus, making Miis, changing settings, all of this requires the gamepad. Even most first-party games are hindered without the gamepad. So, like I said, this is not a bad controller in the slightest. It's just held back by the hardware it's meant to serve. The NES Max is what I consider to be the first great Pro controller. First of all, handles. Second of all, the cycloid is kind of a neat addition. I've heard it compared to what the future 3DS Circle Pad would become, and I think that's a valid comparison. The only problem is, it's not entirely necessary. Games on the NES work perfectly fine with the D-pad, but it's not a nuisance in the slightest. Thirdly, turbo buttons make another appearance, and while their addition should be appreciated, they are placed directly below the A and B buttons. Usually the bottom of my thumb should be able to rest right below the A and B buttons here. They kind of have to awkwardly float above the turbo buttons so as to not hit them. For all the controllers you could get back in the day, this has got to be one of the best out there. Now, about halfway into our rankings, we have the Wii U Gamepad, a pretty controversial controller at the time and even today. Here's the thing about the gamepad. Is it bulky? Yeah. Is it annoying most of the time, especially navigating Wii U menus? For sure. Is it even an interesting main gimmick? Not really. However, is it neat? 100%. You can't tell me this isn't the most interesting controller they've ever made. Gyro, NFC support, camera, touchscreen. Oh, that's just my iPhone. However, by far the coolest thing about the gamepad was its ability to play games with the TV on a different input. Not hogging the TV and letting others use it while you could still play was something completely unheard of for a home console before, and pretty much paved the way for the extreme success of the Switch. But the gamepad itself gets more flack than it honestly should. Sure, it's big, but it's honestly pretty comfortable to hold. Its biggest flaw, in my opinion, is that it gets in its own way too many times. Games like Star Fox Zero would have just been so much better without the gamepad. The battery life is downright horrendous, and unfortunately, it probably led to the Wii U's failure in general. So besides almost killing Nintendo, it's pretty decent. The Wiimote, or the Wii Remote. I'm pretty sure Nintendo never officially named them Wiimotes, but everyone I've ever known calls them that, so that's what I'm sticking with. The Wiimotes are pretty tough to rank. They're incredible for what they're made for, Wii Sports and other Wii series games. However, oh my god, they were terrible for anything else. You literally can't even play the titular Mario and Zelda games without a nunchuck. It's pretty much locked out of any 3D games simply due to the fact that you don't have enough buttons. Without a nunchuck, it's basically a glorified NES controller. You can even see if you go back and watch old Wii commercials that Nintendo had no clue what they were doing. What were these dudes cooking up with 2 Wiimotes? I guess we'll truly never know. However, it's not all bad. Like I said, the Wiimotes did change the game through the introduction of motion controls, which at the time was a very welcome addition. The Wiimotes introduced many people to the world of video games, even if they sacrificed a few TVs in the process. Oh, thank God, I can finally play Mario Galaxy. The Wiimote and Nunchuck are as iconic as Bert and Ernie. I don't think there's as big of a dynamic duo in the history of video game controllers. Are they in a bit of a codependent relationship? Yeah, but when you step back and look at them from a whole, they're pretty alright. The Wiimote provides the power, the motion sensor, and basically all of the important buttons. And the Nunchuck has a joystick. I know, crazy. It's almost like it's been on every controller going back a decade. But you know, making that an accessory was just a great idea. My favorite thing about the Wiimote and Nunchuck is every game that asks you to shake both of them at the same time. I'm sorry to break the illusion, but the Nunchuck is really not detecting anything at all, and it's just there for show. But he's a part of the team, and that's all that matters. All in all, the Wiimote and Nunchuck make a pretty great team, and together they make games playable on the Wii. Is that kinda harsh for a controller I rated 7th? Probably. I'll make this short because I'm also tired of talking about Wiimotes, but the Wii Motion Plus was sick. I really loved the calibrating minigame in Wii Sports Resort. The one, the only, Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons, everybody. They need no introduction. The Joy-Cons are slowly becoming one of the most iconic symbols in gaming. First of all. Second of all, I'll be hearing that click sound effect in my nightmares for decades. But for real, Joy-Cons are really great controllers. Sure, are the buttons small? Yeah, but who are we kidding? The main appeal of the Joy-Cons are their inherently built-in two-player experience. Having two controllers at the ready on a portable console is just freaking absurd. One second they're part of a portable handheld, the next they're a standard home console controller, and then the next they're a box full of balls? Yeah, we've got to talk about HD Rumble. While being severely underused, it's literal magic, and you can't tell me otherwise. And don't even get me started on the IR camera. Oh, wait, I've actually got nothing to say about that. This is awkward. Anyway, the Joy-Cons are truly something revolutionary. The Switch could have been great as just a portable console that could have also been docked. However, the Joy-Cons bring the whole thing home. Playing portable Mario Kart with a friend for the first time is an experience that can't be understated. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Drift. That's all I'm going to say on that. I'm not even going to elaborate because I've talked about it to death and you've heard about it enough. But secondly, the Joy-Con experience can be quite annoying too. Moving Joy-Cons from the Switch to the grip and then the grip to the Switch kind of loses its luster after the first few times. Complete first world problems, I know, but definitely takes a few extra seconds to get playing than just having a normal controller. Overall, the Joy-Cons are really great controllers that revolutionize the way we play games. They've got every gizmo you'd ever need and make playing on the go an amazing experience. Wow. I don't think I've seen anything this beautiful in my entire life. The SNES controller is the standard for a 2D gaming controller. A beautiful D-pad, 4 face buttons, nice rubbery start and select buttons, and even the addition of an L and R button. The only design feature that I'm not a fan of are the lack of handles, but the rounded edges make this an insanely massive upgrade from the NES. Let's also give appreciation to the diamond configuration of the face buttons. This was the first controller to do this, and it was a brilliant decision. This makes pressing 2 buttons at the same time in games like Super Mario World incredibly easy, allowing you to sprint and jump at the same time. Something that has stood the test of time when it comes to controller design. There's really nothing else I can say about this controller. It's just a simple, classic design that has stood the test of time and doesn't feel like it's aged in the slightest. Now, in the top 3, we've got a controller that is still being manufactured by Nintendo 22 years after its initial release. That's right, the GameCube controller. It looks pretty normal from afar, but the closer you look, the weirder this thing gets. Most glaringly, we have the unique face button layout. Unlike any Nintendo controller before or after, this controller put the A button center stage and then kind of just threw the other 3 around it. At first, it kind of looks ugly and confusing, but the more you play with it, the more it weirdly makes sense. Of all of the buttons on this controller, the one you're going to be pressing the most is the A button. And like I said with the SNES controller, pressing 2 buttons at once is pretty crucial, and most combinations are going to include the A button in some fashion. Having all the other face buttons around the A button just makes sense. Next, we've got the pressure-sensitive controllers, which are kind of useless today, but back then, especially with a game like Super Mario Sunshine, felt incredible. And finally, we've got just one Z button on the right side. Why? Just to spite us GameCube controller fans who want to play Mario Kart on the Switch. Besides all the weird things this controller has going on, it's also just an incredibly well-designed one. The sticks are impeccable, the D-pad, while kind of tiny, gets the job done, and the overall feel of this thing is just really great. My only complaint is this pesky wire. If only there was a wireless version of this controller. So, I don't exactly have a Wavebird, but I guess you could say this is a wireless GameCube controller. The Wavebird holds the title of being the first wireless controller made by a first-party manufacturer. And while the original GameCube controller is more widely used than the Wavebird, especially for the lack of input lag in games like Smash, I would be lying if I said the Wavebird wasn't a better controller. It's literally the GameCube controller, but wireless, and wireless is better. And finally, all of you can probably guess what it is. We've got the one, the only, Nintendo Switch Pro Controller. This controller is just the GOAT. First of all, wow. The way it feels in my hands is just incredible. The handles on this thing have such a great texture that makes them grippy and firm. The layout is perfect with two great sticks. The triggers are great, the bumpers are great, and the only thing you can really complain about is the D-pad, as there's not really a bump in the middle, so you can kind of press in the middle of it and press multiple directions at the same time, but in contrast to the Joy-Con's D-pad, which doesn't really exist, it's a massive upgrade. In my opinion, this is the best controller. Sure, is it kind of just an Xbox clone? Yeah, but what good controller isn't? This controller is the epitome of no nonsense. It clocks in, clocks out, and gets you where you want to be. If all the other controllers get the job done, then this controller is Employee of the Month. But that's what I think. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite controller is. And if you've got time, go check out this video ranking every kingdom in Super Mario Odyssey. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.